Can you even imagine that Rambo 3 at the time was the most expensive movie ever made?
What's up, everybody? So today we're talking Rambo 3. This time after the events of Rambo 2, where Rambo just kind of walks off into the unknown, leaving Colonel Trautman in Vietnam after their successful mission, even though it was not a mission that they were expecting to have. Here we find Rambo in Thailand, kind of living in a monastery, trying to live a quiet existence. And here comes Colonel Trautman to help him win the war against the Soviets in Afghanistan. Now, this was about towards the tail end of the real life Afghanistan war, at least the timeline of this movie. And so Colonel Trautman decides, hey, I'm going to basically get back in the field with some CIA guys, and I'm going to take the best soldier I ever trained, and we're going to help these people against these same kind of oppressors that he felt were around in Vietnam. At first, Rambo says, yeah, no, thank you. I got a peaceful life here. I want to keep it that way. But Trautman goes on his mission. He gets captured. Rambo finds out about it and then proceeds to put together a rescue attempt. I still can't wrap my head around the fact that this was the most expensive movie ever made at the time. I guess, with, on location and all the big action set pieces and explosions and probably the ginormous salary that Stallone was commanding at this time because he was basically at the height of his powers. Uh, but it's still great. I don't know if it's worth the money that they put into it, but for my money, of the subsequent uh, Rambo sequels, the first one is almost its own thing. It's just kind of coincidental in my mind that it is attached to the rest of the Rambo movies. But of the more action centric Rambo movies, this one I think is the best one. One of the things I find really interesting about this particular Rambo iteration is how funny it is. I guess in at this point, it wasn't exactly, it was the year before Die Hard came out. And once Die Hard came out, that kind of changed how action heroes used comedy in throughout the story. But there were still like a lot of action comedies that were happening. You got the Beverly Hills Cop 1 and 2, 48 Hours, mainly the Eddie Murphy movies that were coming out that had an action aspect to it. But this time, I guess he decided to add in a little bit of it. And I like the tone with which it's done because it's not kind of over the top. They're not trying to turn Rambo into a funny man. It feels very much within character. And really the humor only comes into play when it's between him and Trotman. And it's really only saved until the very end after Rambo gets him out of the prison that he's held in. So it's really just kind of like two main moments. One where Troutman says to Rambo, "Hey, I'm so sorry I got you into this," and then Rambo's response was, "No, you're not." It's very subtle. It's kind of like it's very rhythmic, and then Rambo goes on and does what he has to do. Another moment is when Rambo's in trouble with some particular thing, and then Troutman shoots and kills the guy that is a huge threat to him. And then when Rambo says, "Hey, thanks," Troutman's response is, "What are friends for?" And it's really just about the timing of these particular lines, and I really appreciated that because it kind of gave a little bit of levity that we never got in the first or the second one. And it's not like they tried to overdo it and overcompensate for it with this one, so I really appreciated that one. And also, it's just like overboard action movie guy moments, and it feels very, very 80s, you know. Not only do you have like at the spoilers, the last battle you can say between Rambo and the main Russian commander is basically a game of, okay, let's make this big giant Russian helicopter and this big tank collide. You know, it's like they're playing a game of chicken, but they're still going to crash into each other. Also, there is no real reason that Rambo should be shirtless. They just do it and you just kind of go with it. So that one's really funny. But I think this is this moment I think is the absolute best moment in the history of 80s action movies, especially of 80s action movie heroes, is during the prison escape. There's an explosion and Rambo has like a piece of wood stuck in his side. Eventually, as they get out, I think this was the unsuccessful rescue attempt, you know. But they no, no, it wasn't. Excuse me. They get Troutman, but they decided to separate. This moment you see when Rambo is by himself. He is like, "All right, I'm gonna go back and do some things. You guys go." Yes, it is the unsuccessful attempt, and he rescues Troutman in this second time. What happens is he basically takes a bullet, pierces through the skin, so now he has this hole in his side, and he needs to cauterize the wound so it doesn't get infected. So he takes off the head of the bullet, pours gunpowder in one end, and then puts a flame on it, and then you see the fire come out of both ends. It's absolutely ridiculous. I remember being in the movie theater as a kid watching it, thinking this is the dumbest and coolest thing I've ever seen. But it's overall really great, and I even liked but they wanted to add a little bit of heart to it. So they kind of really you kind of really saw some stories of Afghan fighters and what they've been going through as the Russians were occupying them during that like 10 plus year war. And so it grounded it a little bit without going overboard, without being too preachy. Because it's still, I mean, if one thing Stallone knows is like he knows what movie he is making, and he's going to stick with that, and he's kind of like the anchor anytime he's in any of these movies. So before it becomes too preachy, he's like, no, let's bring it back. Before it becomes too humorous, no, let's bring it back. Remember who we are. And then I think there's a great balance between that. Yes, there are some overblown moments, like I just mentioned, but in the grand scheme of things, it's still a great action movie, and it's too bad it didn't make so much money when it came out, mainly because bad timing. The Afghan war at this time had already kind of ended, so now that this movie's coming out, it's like, okay, there was like a disconnect. But as far as an action movie itself, it still holds up, and it's still worth a watch. Anyways, what about you guys? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Smash that like button, give me a follow, and I'll see you guys next time.